Dear students, I hope you have now a very good idea about the Rutherford's atomic model from Lecture 2 Part 3. This is Lecture 2 Part 4, the last part of the Lecture 2. This is Atomic Theories Part 3, which is the last part. In this part of the lecture, we'll be talking about the hydrogen atom spectrum, we'll be talking about the Bohr's atomic model, its postulates and limitations. Now let's talk about the hydrogen atom spectrum. Before moving to the H spectrum, let's talk about some very basics of a spectrum. We all know that if a white light passes through a prism, it will generate 7 different colors. And this is known as a spectrum. We get this kind of a spectrum, it is known as continuous spectrum. If we get this kind of a spectrum or this kind of a spectrum, it is called line spectrum. It is so easy, don't worry, I will be explaining it to you how these are being generated. Let's look into this figure. This is the normal atomic structure. This is the positive nucleus. This is the first orbit where n equal 1. This is the second orbit or second shell where this is n equal 2. And this is the third orbit and n equal 3. In n1, there can be maximum of 2 electrons. Say, here we have an electron, here we have an electron as well. In n equal 2, a maximum of 8 electrons can be there. In case of n equal 3, a maximum of 18 electrons can be there. And according to Bohr, these electrons can jump. Say for an example, if we have an electron at n1, it can jump from n1 to n2. Similarly, if we have an electron at n3, it can jump to n2 or it can jump to n1 as well. When an electron jumps from n equal 2 to n equal 1, it will emit some energy. Similarly, if an electron jumps from n equal 3 to n equal 2, it will also radiate some energy. That energy is light, and that light we usually see. And this is the light, this is the line. Say for an example, if an electron jumps from n equal 3 to n equal 1, maybe we will get red color. On the other hand, if an electron jumps from n equal 1 to n equal 3, it will absorb some light, and that is, you already guessed, right? That must be the red light. So this is how we can see the color, this is how we can see the photon. I will make it more clear in the next slide, and also we'll be talking about continuous spectrum concept. If we energize the hydrogen gas, we will get hydrogen atoms from hydrogen molecule. Those hydrogen atoms will emit a specific color spectrum of 4 colors. Our nervous system, however, can't detect those 4 colors. Our brain integrated those 4 colors into one specific color, and that's the color we see. But if we split this color with the help of a prism, then we will see 4 different colors. These colors are actually being emitted by the hydrogen atoms. Violet, blue, bluish-green color, and red. All are of specific wavelengths. This is the emission spectrum of hydrogen. An emission spectrum shows all the specific colors emitted by an energized substance. According to the Bohr's atomic model that we will be talking about soon, the electrons orbit the nucleus, and these electrons have specific energies. And the higher the energy, the larger the radius of the orbit. According to the Bohr's model of the atom, if an electron moves from higher orbit to lower orbit, it will radiate some energy or photon. These energy will be discrete energy, that means distinct, and will not be continuous. That means the spectrum won't be continuous, it will be distinct. Bohr represents those energy levels or orbits with n, where n equal 1 means the first shell or the first orbit, n equal 2 means the second shell or the second orbit, and so on. Bohr found that these energies give us hydrogen's emission spectrum. An electron transition from n equal 3 to n equal 2 emits a red photon, like in this figure. From 4 to 2, it gives a bluish green color. 5 to 2 gives blue color, and 6 to 2 gives violet color. Notice that the electron can't exist between 2 and 3 or 3 to 4 or 4 to 5. That means it can't be 2.1 or 2.2 or 2.3 like this. If an electron could exist in any energy, then the changes of the energy, which is represented here with delta E, would result into a continuous spectrum like this. But only discrete colors are seen, which is we call line spectrum. So the electron must remain in discrete energy. This is the first postulate of the Bohr's atomic model. In 1913, Niels Bohr introduced a model of the atom that contributed a greater understanding to its structure and quantum mechanics. And this model gave Niels Bohr a Nobel Prize in 1922. Let's see the postulates of this atomic model. The first postulate is the electrons revolve around the nucleus in special orbits called discrete orbits to overcome the loss of energy. You remember in Rutherford's atomic model, electrons could lose their energy due to the motion, but according to the Bohr, electron will move in a discrete orbit so that they won't lose any energy. That's because when an electron revolves around the nucleus in this orbit, it doesn't radiate energy. This proved that the electrons need not to lose and fall into the nucleus. That was the major limitation of Rutherford's atomic model, and Bohr gave the proper solution of it. Now comes to the second point. Each orbit is called a shell or energy level, and each level contains a specific amount of energy. Say this is a shell or orbit, this contains a specific energy, and this is the second shell or orbit, and this also contains a specific amount of energy, and this is the third shell or orbit, and this also contains a very specific amount of energy. The fourth postulate is an electron will radiate energy when moving from a higher energy level to a lower energy level. We already discussed it in the previous part of this video. The point 5 is when electrons move from one orbit to another, they emit photons and thus they produce light. We talked about this earlier part of this video as well. Number 6. Orbits closer to the nucleus are more stable and they have the lower energy level. An electron in its orbit with the lowest possible energy is said to be its ground state. So n equal 1, which is K shell, is the ground state and has the lowest possible energy. So these are the postulates of Bohr's atomic model. Now comes to the limitations of Bohr's atomic model. The first limitation is Bohr's model only explained the spectra of species that have a single electron, such as hydrogen atom. The examples we have seen so far is only for hydrogen atom. So this was the first limitation. The second limitation is Bohr's theory predicts the origin of only one spectral line from an electron between any two given energy state. But under a spectroscope of a strong resolution, a single line is found to split into a number of very closely related lines. And Bohr's theory couldn't explain these multiple lines or fine structure of spectral lines. Don't worry about a bit about this point. We'll be discussing in detail about this point when we will be studying the concept of orbital. Now comes to the point number 3. It doesn't explain the splitting of a spectral line under the influence of magnetic field or under the influence of an electric field. We'll be also discussing this point when we'll be talking about orbitals in next lecture. And the fourth limitation is the pictorial concept of electrons jumping from one orbit to another is not justified. Why? Because this is the uncertainty in their positions and the velocities. Remember in lecture 2 part 2 we talked about the history of atomic theory and we saw the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Also, this theory is unrealistic in the sense that periodic motion around a central body usually follow an elliptical path rather than a circular path, which has been assumed in the case of Bohr theory. According to Bohr, the electrons revolve around the nucleus in a circular path, but it has been proved that they follow an elliptical path. If electrons follow elliptical path, the velocity along the path doesn't remain constant. These are the limitations of Bohr's atomic model. I hope you have understood well. And then again, if you have any question, you can ask me through BUX portal or you can email me mhmubashir@bracu.ac.pt. Let's see how many things you can remember. It's recap time.